Monday. We have another edition of the Ad Podcast coming to you guys live. And today we have Dustin Hinz. Dustin is the CMO of Firestone Walker Brewery, probably most well known for their 805 brand. And for over 20 years prior, he spent the bulk of his career leading brands like Guitar Center and Ernie Ball Music Man. Dustin, thanks so much for coming on, man.
Thanks for having me, Dylan.
So, Dustin, I know I gave a couple of, marks on the notches on the belt, so to speak, but I always love hearing about marketers' origin stories. I think you have a somewhat unique story. You really intended to be a musician, picked up a guitar at a young age, and that's what got you excited about creativity and making things. And you didn't go the traditional route. You didn't go to college. And your mom was the executive assistant for the CEO of Guitar Center and got you into the mailroom. I think that's, maybe a story you don't hear as much these days, probably quite common for when we were coming up in the industry. But do you want to tell a little bit about your origin story and how you got into the business?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. Back in our day, that was the thing. Like if you knew people at CMA or CAA or William Morris, I mean, even if you went and you had the gnarliest education, you started in the mailroom, like everybody did. And so that was sort of like cut your teeth, and that was the way Guitar Center was built. But yeah, to your point, I wanted to be a musician, and I didn't have a backup plan. I got my first guitar when I was about 14, and it changed my life. And I realized that I had this like connection with like just kind of making noise and with my hands, and this just like what it stood for. Like it was the odds to the evens. If you were in a band in high school, and you were sort of like kind of, it was the cool kids in the cool club, but you were sort of an outcast. It was like you were either like you played a sport, you were either really good at school, or you were like me and my friends, and you were just sort of rough around the edges, and just always up to creating mischief. And I got that guitar, and I didn't have a backup plan, and I went to as few classes as I could go to and still graduate. And I skate with my friends. I ditched school after lunch because I had a lunch pass, and we would just skate and play music. And I had literally had no backup plan. And I remember when I graduated, my parents were like, "Hey, so Monday you gotta like get a job, you gotta go to school, or you gotta get out." I was like,
Wow.
"What are you
Tough
talking
life.
about?"
Hard knocks.
Oh yeah, So I begged my mom to, and I had like dicked around the Guitar Center offices when I was like 14, 15. I was like, I was always there, and like with my guitar and talking to all the guys that worked there and all the musicians, and I was just enamored by music. And I begged her to give me a job, and she said, "Okay, you can have one just for the summer." And I think and then I think I was there for almost 19 years, and it
Wow.
started there. And then at first it was just like it paid the bills because my parents started charging me rent like immediately. I mean, I was 17 years old. I wasn't even 18 at that point. I graduated at 17, and so they started charging me rent, and it was paying the bills and was paying for my gear. I got a discount, so it was kind of paying for the life that I wanted to live as a musician. And eventually, I sort of like the mailroom was right next to the marketing department, and I would always just sort of hang out in there. And I realized like what they were doing was just an extension of what I wanted to do, was just like telling stories and making art. And I think pretty quickly I was able to like I got my hands into some of the marketing stuff, and I got a job in the marketing department when I was like 18 years old. And typical age old story, just like kind of worked my way through and up, and stumbled into some successes and some failures. And definitely I'm very thankful for a lot of CEOs and CMOs that didn't fire me the multiple times that they could have and should have fired me over the years as a young, snot-nosed kid that thought he had it all figured out.
That's funny, man. Well, I was reflecting today on some of the campaigns you did, and you guys were pretty early to the branded entertainment space. I mean, I heard one interview you talked about the videos series that you guys did and featuring Slash, and this predates YouTube even being a thing. and having the early, like these broadcast networks like DirecTV that were just hungry for, they needed good content, and you guys fulfilled a need at that time. We're talking about big TV budget level productions. Can you talk about some of that early work that you did at Guitar Center, and kind of seems like from the very beginning you weren't as interested in making things that were roadblocking people's attention. You wanted to make content that was worth watching on its own and integrate your brands into those stories. Can you talk a little bit about that, what things looked like in those early days?
Yeah. It's interesting. It wasn't, I mean, it's a really long time ago. If I think back, like, for me at least, it was natural because it was out of necessity. Like, I was the customer. So everything that we did back then, when we would pose these ideas, it was like, well, how do I want to be talked to? Like, what excites me? And I think, marketing the company from the consumer perspective was just like, it was a natural process for me because of, just being a musician, and still am a musician. And, the thought was like, all these great things we're doing. Music and so many pursuits are a hero worship business. The reason that we participate in them is because somebody had inspired us. And a hero doesn't necessarily mean Led Zeppelin, who's on the wall behind me, or, a great brand. It could be in the music world, it could be your uncle. You could have been at a backyard barbecue and saw someone play guitar, in a friend or a family, and you could aspire to want to do that. And I think and that applies to motorsports, action sports, you name it. So much of it's, a hero worship business. And what we realized early on, or what I thought about early on, and we got the team rally behind it, was that if we want to be a part, if we want to resonate with the culture, we have to be a part of the culture. And we saw ourselves right at the epicenter of culture. And if you're going to sell instruments, the number one thing that you can do is get people excited about wanting to play music. And the best way to get people excited about wanting to play music is to untap that feeling that we all get. And everyone's got a different reason of why they do it. I mean, some people like really do believe they're going to be famous, and some people just want to have fun on the weekends. Others want to do it. My nephew, I got him a guitar for his 12th birthday, and one of the things he said to me early on, he's like, yeah, maybe girls will like me now. And it's just like, it was his reason to want to play. Like, everyone had a different reason. And I think that if you can tap into that, that's ultimately going to be the driver. And so when we started to create we were doing these cool in-store events. They started like in our stores. And at the time when I started, we had maybe 25, 27 stores. And when I ended up leaving, we had well over 300, and we had acquired several other businesses like Music and Arts and Musician's Friend. And the idea was like, all these great things are happening. You've got this like brick and mortar epicenter to your business. And it's like, well, a lot of these things are happening just like in Los Angeles. And how do we open those up and take those to the masses? And that was really sort of the seed of the idea. And then it was like, well, okay, well, how do we do that? And it's like, okay, we got to record them, and then how do we broadcast them? And back then there was like so many different cool little gimmicky things. I remember MP3 was MP3.com was a thing, and you had like MySpace, and ultimately we had settled on YouTube, and it sort of took off, and we just started making tons and tons and tons of content organically with great artists. And then and the artists wanted a platform. They wanted filming interviews and performances, and back then wasn't easy. There wasn't a lot of user generated content. I mean, they were massive productions back then. So we just created this really cool groundswell, and then the opportunities just got bigger and bigger. And one day, Jeff Varner, who manages Slash, is still a great friend of mine, lives down the street. Was working at a company called The Collective, and The Collective at the time managed like Linkin Park and Slash and Big Boy and Enrique.
And I think in those early days, they also managed 13 of the top 20 YouTube channels too. They were early in like representation of YouTube channels.
Yeah, maybe. This would have been before that. I mean,
oh wow,
this is like, because YouTube was, well, yeah, it might have been. I mean, I think we'd kicked the show off in like 2009 or 10 or something like that. But there was this guy there. His name is Al Hassas, and he worked on a bunch of stuff. He like managed was like a day-to-day manager for Muhammad Ali, and he was involved in all the things. But he also, like, his claim to fame that was so funny was, and you're right about the YouTubers, he managed Grumpy Cat. Remember Grumpy Cat? This guy like could sell ice to an Eskimo. I mean, he's the best. And I met him, and he was like, bro, this is a TV show. You got to do this as a TV show. It was good. We had called it Guitar Center Sessions at the time, and I was like, oh man, nobody wants a TV show from a retailer, because at the time, like, MTV had sort of moved on to Real World, and it was all that, and music was sort of like VH1 and a few little ancillary things. And but he stayed on me about it, and we pitched it, and we got a lot of no's. And then one day we were sitting at DirecTV and with a guy named Chris Long and Stephen Roberts. And Chris Long now has Cedar Park, and he's he runs he's got that production company with David Ayer, and he's like Jason Statham and The Beekeeper. Those are all his movies now. And
Wow.
so he went on from that to go make movies. And they said, hey, we've got this new music network audience channel. We'd love to make content. We'll take 20 episodes, and we were off to the races. And then I walked out of that meeting, and I was like, well, I mean, I know how to make content. But I have no idea how to like make a TV show. So like, the mechanicals and all of the detail that went into that. And then I went on this fast track. I remember sitting down with our attorneys, and this great attorney named Michael Sherman from Reed Smith. And he's like a legend. We went and sat down across the street from the Death Star in Culver City, and at that little cafe. And I just said, hey, I need you to explain, basically everything I need to know about rights and how to get this deal done and manage this thing appropriately. And he was awesome. And he took me through it and taught me everything that I knew, and held my hand for like the first couple episodes in season. And then by season 2, 3, and 4, I was off to the races. But our first episode was with Peter Gabriel, so that was a different rights dynamic. And then Jane's Addiction, and it just went on from there. And it was hard the first couple of years, because you had to convince these musicians to do it. And then once it reached critical mass, after maybe the first 15 episodes or something like that, then it started to get easier and easier, and the shows got bigger and better, and it became the foundation for documentaries and podcasts and radio now shows. We had been syndicated radio show with NPR, and the idea was just create this massive platform of content that naturally took the Guitar Center brand and our experiences to the masses. And it was a hell of a run. I mean, it was hard to walk away from. I walked away from it while it was all still going.
Wow.
And it was a bummer. It wasn't like I didn't want to, but sometimes in the business world, when Bain Capital leverages, or Ares Capital leverages out Bain Capital, and they bring in CEO from Sports Authority, and then it just that whole thing got complicated, and then it was just like, it's time to go do something different. But that was tough. Making a Super Bowl commercial with Questlove, and TV's commercials, and taking that all then to TV commercials like with Metallica and Steve Aoki, getting to work with like your heroes and never tell them that they're your heroes. Like, be inside of Soho in London at Eric Clapton's house, like talking about, guitars that George Harrison gave him, and then walking over to Abbey Road to see Danny Harrison to show him the guitar. It was an absolute,
probably pretty
incredible.
Surreal.
Yeah, it was just, when you get to make art with other artists, that's just nirvana. And
yeah,
and if you can do that in any field, it's a phenomenal existence. And I miss music a lot. It's an incredible endeavor, because there are very few pursuits that you can monetize that inspire people globally to push culture forward.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't seem like you've left music even, in a meaningful way, going over to the beer marketing world. So much of beer marketing goes hand in hand with the entertainment industry. I find myself shooting you pictures of 805 when I see them in interesting places like the Sphere in Las Vegas, or, at a conference or something like that. But, like, you talk a lot about creating that consumption moment. And, probably most consumption moments for alcoholic beverage are either take place at home or at live events, or, down at the local bar with your friends. But like the ones at scale, that are meaningful. Like I read some crazy statistic the other day that Stagecoach sold more beer in one day than both weeks of Coachella or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, you have to kind of find these meaningful moments, and music continues to be one. So how have you translated work and that ethos of music marketing over to the work that you guys are doing with 805 and the Firestone brands?
Yeah, good question. I did hear that stat, and it came up the other day in a meeting. The question, I dug into it. I haven't gotten the answer yet, but they said it was beer. I wonder. I'm still curious if it was like seltzer and RTDs and FMBs. But yeah, I mean, cowboys like to drink, and it's a. And what's really interesting is when you look at those, because we actually had right after that we did a little kind of case study on, when you look at rodeo consumption, which we do a bunch of rodeos, and then we also do a bunch of like festivals, music festivals. And when you looked, there's still it's nearly the same amount of consumption, but what they're consuming are drastically different. Like, in one, 805 was the top seller, and then Cali Squeeze, and then on at the rodeo. And then when you went to like the college, music festival, it was like, we have this new like flavor forward art, like FMB idea, that's a beer called Mind Haze Rage, and that outsold 805 3-1. So it's really like you've got to have a portfolio in the beverage business that speaks to just the crazy vast palettes. I mean, there's the number one beer purchasers or the number, I think 45 and up is still 60% of the beer business. So there's a lot of chasing of like, everyone's worried about, Gen Z and what's next, and which, we should be, but you can't forget about like that core demographic. So the transition to beer was really interesting, luckily, because I was coming into a brand like 805 that was immersed in culture already and lifestyle. I mean, that's when I met David Walker, and he had, I was leaving Ernie Ball. He was looking for a CMO, and when I met him, I was like, man, I don't know much about the beer business, and I'm kind of a music rat. I see your billboards everywhere, but like I don't. I understand global CPG brands, but something that's kind of immersed in culture and passion. And he's like, well, I think I have that. And with 805, and he's like, I got enough beer people around me. I'm looking for people who understand lifestyle brands. And so next thing I know, I was off to the races. And I think the thing we just started the thing we think about every day is, why our brands? Why 805? Why Cali Squeeze? Why Firestone? And sometimes that's going to be an emotion, like it's a brand that you resonate with, and sometimes that's going to be some feature benefit, whether the customers purchase for different reasons. And my belief is that first thing they're looking for is the ABV consumption, right? Are they looking for zero alcohol? Are they looking for high alcohol? Then what's the flavor they're looking for? Actually, it's flip. I'm sorry. It's flavor. What flavor? What are they looking for? They want beer flavored beer. Do they want hard lemon? They want lemonade. They want fruit. They want IPA. What do they want? And then are they looking for a high ABV occasion or a non-alc occasion? And there's a lot of ABVs in between. And then once the customer checks those two boxes, then the question is, well, what's the brand? There's a million IPAs. You've got an unending list of Mexican lagers and American domestic beers, and so why are they choosing your brand? And I think that's that's where marketing and brand comes into play. Like, you've got a Red Bull hat on. Why not a Monster hat? Why not a Rockstar hat? Why not a Celsius hat? There's the brand that you can play in. And then what we've always tried to do with 805 is like try to be odds to the evens. And in a really incredibly diverse beer landscape where, what's Heineken, 50 billion total cap, Constellation's 28 billion, like ABI's like over 100 billion. I mean, it's just, these are brands with just so much gravity and momentum and horsepower. They could squash you like a bug if they wanted to. And so the trick is like, how does a brand like 805 from the Central Coast of California stand out? And it's like, well, you got to stand out. You got to stand for something. And that's what I was really lucky to inherit a brand with some, some strong legs, and we just kept building on it and building on it and building on it, and then finding the lanes for the full portfolio, whether that be, 805 or Cali Squeeze or the Mind Haze range or the Firestone craft portfolio. Like, we've built this awesome portfolio that is incredibly diverse in the taste buds that it can reach. And having like they say, having a diversified portfolio kind of helps you get through the tough times. And that's what we've really worked to build. And I've had to learn a lot. I mean, the wholesale network is definitely very different in beer than in other industries, and the retail dynamics are different. But at the end of the day, so kind of it's all the same in the sense of develop great products, develop great brands, work your network relentlessly, find all the gaps and the white space to pull every lever you can to get your product on the shelf and ultimately convert that customer. And the good news is, at the end of the day, so much of it is still in your hands. That top of the funnel, it's never been more accessible. And for a brand perspective, I mean, think about Big Beer was cut their teeth in radio and television spots. Now, you can go CTV, you can go digital, you can target you with all the new data with between Nielsen and Walmart Connect and all the stuff that you can do. You can get so laser focused that you can just eliminate waste. You don't have to spend the kind of money if you're trying to be targeted. You don't have to go shotgun approach with these national buys and spend the money that some of these brands have to spend to continue to buy relevance. It's a good problem to have. I mean, I'd love to be spending Budweiser money and on a regular basis, but we still get to, I still very proud of the work that the team does, and for a little regional brewery like ours to be able to be in the same conversation with a lot of these brands from at least a brand power perspective is pretty rewarding, and it's a testament to what the guys David and Adam built over the last 30 years.
Yeah, I love that. I think I heard you quote in another interview. It was something like, be the most nationally known brand with regional availability. Is that the right quote?
Globally recognized, yeah, the most globally recognized, regionally available beer brand in the world. And that's because, we have founders in an ownership group that is, they'll say it all the time. I don't want to be the biggest brewery. I just want to be, the best brewery. We don't have to grow at all costs. We can intentionally skew rat and position ourselves for success. And when you're publicly traded, if you're not delivering substantial comp growth for your shareholders, like you're that's a long walk off a short pier. So there is some value to family run businesses, because at the end of the day, what they're worried about is their number one priority is, the guys say their slogan's beer before glory. It's great beer, before anything else. And we are really good at saying no to things that don't meet our core principles. And that's a healthy way to run a business. I think it's rewarding for, and it's why I think we keep so much of our core team together, is because they're all a part of something bigger. And we get to invest in these ideas for the long haul. When we get involved with an athlete, it's not a 1 year, one and done deal. We'll oftentimes, I've been here 6 years now, and I think we've been with Tyler Behrman for almost 10 years, and Connor Coffin, I think we just re-signed for another 3 years. So that'll be 7 years. So we're in it for the long haul, and, we're building forever brands. When you think about, you think about this because of influencer culture, like there's all these overnight successes, right? But there's not a whole lot of overnight successes in the beer business. There are a few, but for the most part, think of like Twisted Tea. Like Twisted Tea's been around for 30 years. Pacifico, 125 years. Modelo, 100 years. Budweiser, 150 years. Duvel, 150 years. These are brands. What other industry besides like automotive?
It's as old as time, right?
Yeah. What other brands have been around that long? And so when you think about the idea that you're standing on the shoulder of giants and brands are precious, your number one responsibility is in my role, is like having the discipline and backbone of titanium to withstand the storm of like, we need new. What's next? It's like, well, let's, first and foremost, let's make sure that 805 doesn't go anywhere and continues to have a long, some longevity. Because think about when you were a kid in the garage with your dad wrenching on a bike. And, for me, it was, the Coors Light, that was like the beer that was always around silver bullets. And like, that's the job now. It's like, how do you make sure that someone's having that multi-generational experience so that when they grow up, it's, they're drinking the beer that's just been a part of their entire life story. And you can say that for a lot of brands. I mean, cars, you could say that with motorcycles, things like that. But it's a really interesting business segment in the beer business. So I don't know.
Yeah,
if
I love that.
question.
No, I love that. I love that idea of like connecting to affinity.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's so important these days. Like, if you want to look at a brand, who I always like to look at from an affinity perspective is, Viore down here in San Diego, right?
Yeah.
Like, Lululemon was doing just fine before those guys showed up, and they're still doing fine. But Viore really found that cross section of like, born in San Diego, Southern California, in its look and feel, and kind of took that whole like, live life in your yoga pants thing to like another level, but made it appropriate for like the Southern California, surf and yoga community. I wonder, how much do you guys lean on Central California and kind of the world that you guys come from? I grew up in Santa Barbara, so I'm very familiar with the lifestyle of like, surf in the morning, play in the afternoon in the hills on your motorcycle or your mountain bike, and, kind of that more like agricarian Ventura County, Ojai. Like, how much do you guys like try and export that culture as kind of that, that idea of being like regionally known and or national, globally known but regionally available? Like, how much do you lean into that Central California lifestyle vibe?
I pretty heavily, but I don't think it's as intentional these days as it used to be. I mean, Born on the Central Coast was a huge play early on because so much of the business of the brewery was done within, the 200 miles of the brewery. And when you're lucky enough that your home market, I mean, your home market being California has pros and cons. One, it's incredibly challenging to run a business and manufacturing business, in California with all the regulations, and but also it's the fourth largest, economy in the world, and you've got a really diverse population, and so winning in your, starting as a regional brewer, which the guys, did a local craft brewer, and building that up over time, there's a real nice built-in audience there. And I think over time, with 805, it's just branded in who we are. Everything that we do, from surf to, to that, we always say, from kind of the, surf to the mountains. You can snowboard and surf in the same day in California, if you're lucky and traffic works out for you. But especially down where you're at, yeah, you can get up to Bear and then San Diego in the same day. And so all of the pursuits that we tap into are just all about, that can all be found here, whether that's rodeo or surfing or skiing or MMA culture, boxing. And it's just a part of who we are. And California travels fairly well. There are some markets where it's a little more challenging. When you have a market with a real strong sense of identity, it's a little harder to crack that code. I mean, think of Texas, right? You go to Texas, you go like Shiner Bock and Lone Star, and you're going to have the 805s of Texas in those markets. And then, same with like Pac Northwest and the East Coast, like Yingling up in the Northeast. There's so many brands that speak to a regionality. And then the trick is, how can you break out of that? Or, should you break out of that? And that's why having a really smart portfolio that allows you to have different brands that do different things is sort of what we set up. So with California, we don't try to be too on the nose about it. Like, we don't, in California, obviously we scream about it because it's like, brewed in California, brewed right here. I mean, beer is no different than any perishable item. I mean, the closer, it is to the brewery, the closer you are to the brewery, the fresher it's going to be. And so I think there's a focus for California residents. And then outside of California, it's probably more about way of life. Do you aspire to the same things that the brand represents? And then you have brands like Cali Squeeze, where it's the product's actually called Cali Squeeze, and we sell a lot of Cali Squeeze in Illinois, and we sell a lot of Cali Squeeze in North Carolina, and because I think California is an idea that translates. So does New York, and so does Texas and Colorado. There are certain ethoses that come with the regionality, and I think that if you play them the right way, they can land nicely. And you just have to. They've got to be the great things about where you're from. But I mean, think about it. Levi's, right? Like one of the most probably globally recognized, you know, um, brands from California. Apple, everything
Mm-hmm.
says designed in Cupertino, and then you've got, it used to be Tesla. Tesla used to be proud to be from California. They've moved around a little bit, but I mean, still a
Yeah.
huge workforce of Tesla here. So there's a lot of great brands that come out of California, and that's the one thing we're always cautious of, though, is like we don't want to overdo it, because you don't want to alienate. You don't want to turn somebody off, because especially in a very polarized political world where
Mm.
red versus blue, it's like ideally you just want to be kind of purple and
Yeah, you don't want
sell,
people
sell,
to
sell beer to
keep
everybody.
keep your liberal California beer out of my state, right? I
Well,
can see
what's
that.
funny is like California is really, you've got lots of red and lots of blue,
Yeah,
and the
yeah.
beautiful thing about beer is that it is the
It's a
perfect
unifier.
it is the perfect elixir to have a great conversation and bring people together. So
I love that. So we talked a little bit about the early programs you pioneered at Guitar Center. With really building these content programs as brand experiences, really trying to drive buzz, but also driving foot traffic into retailers. I know at Firestone, you guys have a couple of places where you can uniquely showcase the brand to consumers, like in your own controlled environment. I'm speaking specifically to the brewery. I believe it's in Santa Maria, kind of San Luis Obispo area. Is that right?
we have one in Paso. We have one
Paso,
in
that's right. Paso
Santa.
Robles. Yep.
So yeah, that's Mecca. That's the big brewery up in Paso, and then
Yep.
the original brewery is in Santa Ynez, Buellton,
Yep.
which is called Barrel Works, and then we have the our propagator test pilot brewery and tap room in Marina Del Rey. And
Nice.
so we sort of have
Awesome.
like this perfect balance up the coast, or where I spend a lot of my time going between Paso and Marina Del Rey. But yeah, we have three great offices, three great tap rooms, and three different types of customers, which is great.
I love that. How do you leverage those physical assets to kind of create brand experiences and a place where your consumers can interface with you through the product, but in an environment that you control the surroundings?
Yeah, we like to call them temples to the brand, right? So
Mm,
you can have a curated experience, and the team's done a really phenomenal job, and it's been sort of it's the brainchild and passion project of Nick Firestone, who's our CEO today, and he's Adam Firestone's son. Grew up in the brewery, and he's very hands-on with the menu and the brewery and the experience. And he's sort of over the last couple of years has helped breathe some even more life into those with the right food, the right beer, the right experience. And what it allows us to do, and we talk about this a lot, because I think on our we call it the brew pack, which is our email list of all of our customers just for the tap rooms. It's almost
hmm
200,000 people strong. And
Wow.
we just work that that we work that list all the time, but we don't overdo it. From a you don't want to be so pretentious with any sort of purist of any endeavor. Can sometimes overdo it, right? You can, like, whether that's baseball or auto, or like, you don't want to be so purist that you alienate the masses. And I think what we do a really good job of it's great food, accessible food, smash burgers, pizza, Taco Tuesdays, but they're gourmet tacos, and then food and beer pairings. And we take people on a journey of beer. I mean, at any given time, there could be 30, 40 beers on tap at the tap room in Venice. And sure, we're known for 805, Cali Squeeze, Mind Haze, Union Jack, but the crazy beers coming out of our barrel aged program and our beer club, or the wild ales, or some of the concoctions that Matt Brindleson and his brew team are coming up with. You go in there and you can really, fall in love with this idea of, quality and craftsmanship of, these things are made by these curious tinkerers. And the hope is by bringing people into that world, they're going to have a fun experience. I mean, sitting in the sun in Marina Del Rey, having a beer and eating a smash burger on a Sunday afternoon. I mean, you could just do that because it's a great day. But if you want to take the next step and learn more about beer, join the beer club, or, you fall into, starting to, watch some of our films, or, whether that be about surfers or, motocross riders or bull riders, or, you want to go in and, take part of the massive apparel business that we've built over the years. You can kind of do it all, but it's a low pressure environment. It's meant to be a great place to go and hang. It's actually one of the top places you can go to watch sports on a weekend. But along the way, everyone that works there is so passionate about beer. So many of them are cicerones that they'll take you through that whole process, and you can learn a lot about beer, as I have over the 5+ years that I've been there. You learn so much just being around all these people who love beer the way that I loved music. And that was really interesting to me because I came in as a newbie. I mean, the amount of times in my first 5 years where people said, well, the thing you got to understand about the beer business, and they were right. And but it's awesome to be around so many people that, like, the joke is like, Matt Brindleson, who's our brewmaster, is one of the greatest brewmasters in the world. I mean, the joke's always like, when you talk to Matt about a product coming to market, I'll say, Matt, look, you can drink a beer and tell me if it rained the day that hop was picked. Like me, on the other hand, or, general consumer is not as advanced of a palate. So, but you could say that about so many industries, and that's what makes it cool, is that at the heart of the brewery in this business are a bunch of people like Matt Brindleson and Nick Firestone and David Walker and Adam Firestone and Ken Grossman and all these other, you can name, there's 9,500 craft brewers across the country. They all care to that degree about the beer, and so it makes it pretty easy for me and the team around that to just figure out how to tap into that passion and share it with the world.
Yeah, I heard an interesting story talking about you interfacing with that team about when you guys launched Cerveza and the spirited debate that came over the first time you guys were going to have a clear bottle. I thought that was kind of funny.
Well, yeah, because our beer is not pasteurized, right?
Which right. There's a good reason for it.
Yeah, and I had no idea what that meant my first couple months, and that was part of me learning more about the beer business. But yeah, we have the dark amber bottles for a reason, and it is to prevent beer from skunking. And that can be, so it's light staple. And but what was cool about the process is when we decided that, hey, we really want to show consumers and drinkers what 805 Cerveza is. It is a light, refreshing, beautiful beer, and it would help if we could show them that beer. So Matt went on a mission, and it was actually when he was back in Belgium, and he came back with the idea of like, hey, I think I know how to do this without compromising his belief in brewing. And so we did, and we put them into clear bottles, and we did a few different things, and sales were up 20%. Just by that little innovation change, which allowed us to put things in renders differently. And then that turned into, hey, let's show the beer in color in TV commercials, which is, the spots that are running right now are the first time we ever did that. And so innovation isn't just a new product. It's a new idea. It's a new way to tell stories. It's a new process. And so we challenge ourselves all the time of, we've got this world that's in black and white, that's never in color. We've never shown the world in color, but we started to work on some ideas, and then these new spots that came out, we said, well, what if the beer's in color and everything's in black and white? How do we do that? And then we challenged our design team to figure out how, our creative team to figure out how to do that, which was as simple as like, shooting the beer in front of a black and white, television, the black and white screen. So that was a way to do it in a way that felt real and not like try to rotoscope out and color it.
Everything.
But, the team found a really cool way to do it. and it's just us, continue to innovate and still try to be odds of the evens and not sell our soul for growth at all costs, but like, how do we do it in a way that we can feel really good out and hopefully be different? Because there's a lot of really in beer marketing, beer is some of the best marketing in the world.
Yeah.
When you think about when I was a kid, you grew up with the Budweiser frogs, or think of all those amazing campaigns that beer had, and beer is some of the greatest marketing on earth. And so being able to be a small part of that and come up with unique and interesting ways to kind of keep that going forward without falling into a sea of sameness can be challenging and rewarding at the same time, and sort of endless, because beer is endless. It's like there's no seasonality to beer. It's every day. So you just gotta, you wake up every day with an idea and you get going.
Get to work. I love it. So you talked a little bit about the spectrum of alcohol content these days. It seems like non-alc is an inevitable trend that almost every brewery is jumping into. Do you guys have a non-alc strategy? Are you guys in that category?
Yeah. Nice. So we launched 805 last September. And so it's, about 6 months old right now, and it's doing well for us. Non-alc's about 3%, 2% to 3% of total beer business. I think it's this year, the forecast was, excuse me, 823 million, I think. So, it's a substantial business, and I think what it's giving, it's another occasion. The interesting thing is that people that are drinking non-alcs, there's a fraction of them that are only drinking non-alc, but still they're putting it into the rotation. Sorry. So you might be at a bar, you have a couple of beers, and you throw in a non-alc. And you've got that type of consumer, and then you've also got the consumer who's just maybe taking a night off or doesn't drink at all. So it's been an interesting strategy for us. It's still sorry. It's a still small part of the business, but it's a growing part of the business. And like I said, any healthy business with a diversified portfolio is going to have a play there. I think got to be careful not to overdo it. You don't want it to become, unless you're a non-alc brewery, which there's basically one right now, and they're on fire. They're doing a great job.
Yeah,
I think they're 7 years old. Again, not another overnight success. I think Bill and his team, I think, just finished 7 years. So they've been at this for a long time. Yeah. 805 is only 13 years old. So it's, they're riding, they're doing a great job right now, and they're getting people excited about beer. And that's the beautiful thing about any industry. And I think you mentioned Brewery earlier, right? That the sea's deep enough for all of these brands. And I think the more brands you have getting people excited about the soulful science and brewing, and the taste of beer, whether that beer's got 0% alcohol or 2% alcohol, or for the crazies that want to drink 10%, they're helping develop a culture. And beer is one of the oldest endeavors known to man. I mean, people have been brewing beer for thousands and thousands of years, and I think that's a good thing. So yeah, non-alc's a part of the strategy, and I think we're being smart about it. We like what we see with 805 so far, and we like that it works really nicely with our portfolio, because within once the way that we've done this is like the pre-race and the podium. It's but the paddle out to the podium, you've got pro surfers that aren't chinning an 805 before they paddle out to pipe. But when they come out and they're on the podium, they can enjoy a beer. So we found a really nice duality for the brands there, and I think they all, rising tide lifts all boats, and so that's the beautiful thing about 805. You've got Blonde, you've got Cerveza, you've got 805 now. We've got a few new things coming, and all of it builds the legend of 805.
Yeah, I love that. So when you were at Guitar Center, you talked about part of the work that you guys were doing in branded entertainment, building a huge YouTube presence on par with some of the other brands that got early to brand as a publisher. We talked about Red Bull, we talked about GoPro. You also talked about this being a artist discovery platform, and I feel like you guys are very intentional about that, and the marketing that you guys do, both in front of the camera and behind the camera at 805, really coming alongside emerging filmmakers and creators to help them tell their stories in more authentic ways with higher production values, or giving them the money that they need to travel to a location or be on tour when they don't have access to traditional endemic sponsors. Can you talk a little bit about that idea of, celebrating emerging talent or working with emerging talent?
Yeah, I think there's a few brands that do a really, really solid job of it. And I think the idea is just, like I said earlier, standing for something. And I think over time, if you get up every day and you put in the work and you do the right thing and you do right by people and you support your industry and culture and you work to push culture forward, I think that is a brand equity that is hard to erode. And people are consumers are smart and they watch brands come and go. It happens in beer all the time. You can see a sponsor come in for a thing because that's on their agenda, or that's one of their tactics for that calendar year, and then they move on. And I think we want to show up every day and with the right people, doing the right things, investing in our own legend. That's a big piece of it, right? We try when we do. We have some really smart sponsorships, and we've really focused on making them partnerships because we understand that there's so much competition in our space that someone could outbid us, no problem. We need our partners to want to work with us, to choose us, because we believe in the same thing. We had shared values. We show up. We create great work, and we do the right thing. And I think that when you look at our athletes, you look at our partners, you look at the things that we do. I think I think we put our money where our mouth is, and you look at other great brands. I mean, Red Bull is. I don't think there's a brand better than Red Bull. And there's a really interesting story. When Tyler Behrman, one of our top motocross athletes, he had a really gnarly accident a couple years back at Mammoth, and he was unconscious for like eight minutes. Something crazy. Broke his arm. Was like really bad head injury, and Red Bull just put him on the path to recovery. Neuroscientist, and did everything just because he's one of their athletes, and that's what they do. And when you think about that, and you think about that, that's a conscious decision. There's so many brands that would just choose to exercise an injury clause, that would move on and say, hey, this is a lot of money tied up into this, and I'm not getting a return. But to stick with your athlete like that, and get them back to a point to where Tyler is going to be at X Games and in 5 weeks, and going for another medal. And he won. I think he won bronze, like his first X Games back. He came out and won bronze again, and that's an example of a brand that you think about that just stands for something so clear and enduring. And we Firestone's the same way. Because it's because you're run by a family with their names on the building, they want to do the right thing at every turn. And so that's just sort of it. When you grow up in that in music, like I have, there's just no other way. Like sometimes those conversations come up, and you're like, so how's this even a conversation? And we're like, somebody new or an agency partner or somebody that doesn't know, you're just like, yeah, that's just not the way we do things around here. It's you. So when you grow up in the music space, when musicians are probably one of the more marginalized creative entities out there, where at the time when you were a kid, when you wanted a major label deal, number one, they were hard to get. Two, if you had to sign your life away. That's why when we were at Guitar Center, we acquired TuneCore, and we turned that into a platform, because we were like, they had created this new platform that allowed you to distribute your music to all the major platforms, own your rights, and you kept all the money, and all you had to pay was $9 a month for an album. And I think it was $9 a month or $9 a year. I don't remember, but the idea was transformational, because it was like, that was at Guitar Center. We were like, how do we give back? How do we meet more guitar players? Well, we have to get up every day and create programs and fight for ideas that help them live sustained lives. So imagine the idea that you could get your music on iTunes. You had to give iTunes their VIG at 30%. You kept the rest of the money. And we had artists like Nine Inch Nails using the platform in early days, because it was a way to circumvent the major label industrial complex that back then were the gatekeepers to whether or not your music got played on the radio. You had physical media, And that was just another idea. So that has been ingrained in me my entire career of like, how do we? My job is to sell beer. These athletes' jobs are, or artists' jobs or creators, is to create a career for themselves, or our apparel partners' jobs are do X. And so when we create collaboration lines or apparel lines or beers or events, we try to do it in a way that everybody wins. And that's why I think and I hope that people, call us to want to be a part of things and work with us at a level that's digestible for us, because things like deals like the World Surf League aren't cheap.
Yeah.
Especially when you're playing a world of like MasterCard money, crypto.com money, and it's like the delta between like what we would for a logo on a screen for us versus Lexus. I mean, those are drastically different oceans to play in.
Yeah. Well, I've loved how you have always had just a bit of a, guerrilla marketer's heart, I suppose, even when you maybe didn't necessarily have to do it that way. Maybe you always have to some degree, but I feel like you've been pretty successful in proving that both, non-traditional and traditional partnerships, you can be successful at executing them. But it feels to me like you almost enjoy the process of doing it the guerrilla way.
It is
I remember
it is sport fishing. It can be a little sport fishing for me, but it depends on who your CFO and CEO is. I mean, I don't know a lot of like big spenders that have been around a long time. I mean, you know what? The biggest brands too, like, are the cheapest brands. Like, I don't want to name names, but like, I know a lot of multi-billion-dollar brands that are cheap, and that's the reason they're multi-billion-dollar brands, is because you don't light money on fire. Anyways, I interrupted you. Sorry.
No, I love it. Well, I remember listening to a story of like an activation you did at South by, where you had like, just this amazing like murderers row lineup, playing a 900 person venue. And then your guys' permits got pulled and you had 10 days to figure out a new location and just all this stuff. And, I think it makes for an interesting career, an exciting career to have to sometimes do things the hard way, right?
And you know what? Again, it's fun. Like, I enjoy, like, maybe I'm a masochist, or like there's some, but like I like enjoyed South by being pissed off at me. Like, I just like, I'm like, we're not gonna pay you. Wait, how much money do you want? Like $500,000? Like, no way. Like, it's like, let's go be guerrilla. Like, and you're right. But when I started at Guitar Center, it was small. It was like this small thing. It was like 25 store. And that story of like South by Southwest, I don't know, 2014, I think that was last time I went.
Yeah.
Snoop Dogg and Soundgarden and Phanogram. And it was fun. It was fun to be odds to the evens and guerrilla. And it was just like a punk rock aesthetic. Like, let's put the money into the art. Like, I don't want the money to go to like some giant conglomerate or, I'm not saying that South by is, but like, you just like, I want the money to go to the art. And if I had to give South by Southwest or whomever $250,000 or $500,000, then there's no money left for the art. And there is something fun. And look, it was hard to get Guitar Center to spend money on a TV show. I mean, the CEO multiple times would just be like, "What?" Like, it would blow your mind how little money we spent on it compared to what DirecTV spent on it. And even then, our CEO at the time would always question it, like, "What's the ROI on this?" And he'd be like, "Okay, if you were to buy," and so the way you break it down is we're like, "Okay, we have X amount of hundreds of hours of broadcast global television. If you were to buy that media, it would cost," I think the number was like $35 million. That's what it would have cost to buy all the airtime that we were getting as part of our deal. The DirecTV was spending $3 million a year to produce. And it was still like, yeah, but like, how can you prove this is driving sales? And you just like, you start pulling your hair out. You're just like, and that was, that's why so much of the madness is, to be successful in this world, it's have a phenomenal relationship with your CFO. Be fully aligned with your CEO. Like, if you don't believe the things with your CEO, you're going to have a really hard time. If your CEO is not a believer in brand and you're a brand marketer, like, have your resume ready and handy at all times, because they're always going to question it, and you've got to be able to sell the value of brand, and it can't just be a dog and pony. You've got to have real data. You got to figure out the math on how to show that television works and content works and how all these things actually can move the needle, because at the end of the day, that's what we all have a master to serve, and that's profitability, EBITDA, and growth. And it's not just about making fun videos and being cool. And that's something that I learned really early on in my career, and that I make sure all the really talented young people that work for me over the years is like you try to educate them. It's like we're not making art. Art is the advertising is the art of selling, and so like we're making really great work that can sell and can and we're not this isn't about hanging up cool pictures in our bedroom and our garage. And along the way, if you can find a way to do that effectively and you can perpetuate culture, then that's the sweet spot.
That's a
And
double win.
what an amazing way to do it. And few brands do it well, and few do brands stick with it, because look, it's you got to have, like I said, to be good at in our business. CMOs have a very short lifespan, and you've got to have a backbone of titanium to stand up for what you believe in, and especially in brand building, because so much of brand building is opinion and taste, and like why left versus right, why up versus down. Well, sure, you can do consumer surveys and focus groups and all of that. At the end of the day, it's about taste, and and being able to build a team that can collectively be honed in on what you stand for. And think of how many, what Nike just went through this, right? Like they had to bring back so many brands. It is amazing how like 1, 2, 3, 4 people like can make a brand. Steve Jobs, Johnny Ive, right? The team at Nike, the team at Converse, Jeff Cottrell back in the day when I was at Guitar Center and Cottrell was at Converse. He built Rubber Tracks, that awesome studio in Brooklyn. And John Cohen, who was at Fader, we had done some stuff with Fader. Like we used to do the Levi's Fader Fort all the time. And again, talk about the kings of guerrilla marketing, Fader. Like they built the Fader Fort and they would do all that cool stuff. They had this idea for Rubber Tracks, and we helped them build that studio back in the day. And that was just the way it was done back then.
Yeah, and I think Jeff launched the Starbucks Records program too,
yeah,
right? Where you were selling CDs at the counter in Starbucks.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And so those are the things that it's fun, it's challenging, and then ultimately, if you do it right and you figure out the formula, it's pretty rewarding. Because think about, especially in the world that we're in now, whether it be music or moto, or there's somebody along the way that's going to watch something. Let's just say it's in music. Like how many people watched a film about an artist that we made, or with an artist that we made, and that inspired them to want to play guitar, and maybe they go on to have this incredible career and they inspire how many people to want to play music. Or somebody watches a film about surfing and they go out and they become the next Kelly Slater. Like when you realize that you're in the business of creating like fuel for inspiration and aspiration, you never know what the impact of your work is going to be one day. And I was at a restaurant, I don't know, maybe a couple months ago, and there was a guy at the bar. He'd had way too much to drink, and he was going on and on about the Slash documentary he saw, and it was the thing I wrote, I don't know, 10 years ago. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Like there's somebody still watching, it's on Amazon. I think you can get it on iTunes, but there was a guy that was like watching that and talking about how it was the greatest thing he'd ever saw. And I was like, I thought it was one of the worst things I ever did. But he, cause I just wasn't, wasn't happy with how it came out. But but here's a guy that like, that inspired him. And that if that guy probably owns a guitar or 2 or 3. And I think as marketers, we're really lucky to be in that position to get to do that, versus get up every day and I think there's a lot of worse things to market and storytell about than the industries that we're in now.
Yeah, nah. Well, look, I think that's probably a good line to end on. I think my big takeaway from your career has been, make things that people want to watch, inspire, don't just interrupt them with messaging that they're never going to care about and probably don't want to see anyway. So I think you're doing a good job. Keep up
Thanks,
the
brother.
good work. So, Dustin, if people want to learn more about you, where should they connect? And if they want to learn more about what you're doing at 805 and Firestone and all the things, where should people look you up?
Well, if you want to follow Firestone, FirestoneWalker.com, 805beer.com. You can definitely keep up with all the awesome work the team's doing. And then, me, DustinHinz.com. But there's not much to see there. It's really about all the work the team's doing. But appreciate it, Dylan. Awesome conversation. Thanks for taking me on a walk down memory lane. Always fun.
Of course. I appreciate you, man.
Right,
Well, hey, everybody else who's watching along at home, wherever you're seeing or listening, don't forget to go ahead and give us a subscribe or a follow. If you give us an honest review on whatever platform you're checking out this content, that's how we find a bigger audience organically. And last but not least, if you know a aspiring action sports marketer or somebody in the beer advertising space who you think would enjoy the conversation I had with Dustin today, or some young 14-year-old kid who is playing music and wants to know what other opportunities are out there for him, don't forget to share the show, and we will see